My name is Erica, and I grew up in a small town where almost everyone knows each other. The streets are quiet, the houses are simple, and life moves slowly. Every morning, people greet each other at the bakery, children ride their bicycles through the narrow roads, and the smell of fresh bread often fills the air. It is the kind of place where nothing seems to change very much. For many people, this town feels comfortable and safe, but for me, it sometimes felt a little too small for my dreams. I was 16 years old, and most people would describe me as a quiet girl. I wasn't the kind of person who spoke loudly in class or told exciting stories to groups of friends. Instead, I preferred peaceful moments alone, especially when I had my sketchbook in my hands. Drawing had always been my favorite thing in the world. Ever since I was a child, I loved turning blank pages into something meaningful. A simple pencil could create mountains, faces, forests, or entire imaginary worlds. When I was drawing, I felt calm and focused, as if the world around me had suddenly become silent. Sometimes I didn't even notice how quickly time passed. But even though drawing made me happy, I kept my dream mostly to myself. You see, I wanted to become an artist. Whenever I imagined the future, I pictured myself in a bright studio filled with paintings. Sunlight would come through the windows, colors would cover the walls, and I would spend my days creating art that made people feel something special. It was a beautiful dream, but it was also a dream I was afraid to say out loud. At school, most of my classmates had very clear and practical goals. Some wanted to become doctors. Others talked about becoming engineers, business owners, or lawyers. They spoke confidently about their plans, and everyone seemed to admire their ambition. When people talked about the future, I usually stayed quiet. Part of me believed my dream wasn't serious enough. One afternoon in art class, something happened that made me think about my dream more deeply. Our teacher walked into the classroom holding a stack of blank drawing papers. He placed them on each desk and smiled at us. "Today," he said, "I want you to draw something very personal." The room became quiet as everyone listened. "Draw your dream," he continued. "Draw the future you hope for." At first, I just stared at the empty page in front of me. My mind was full of thoughts. I knew exactly what my dream looked like, but I wasn't sure if I was brave enough to draw it. What if someone laughed? What if they thought it was childish? But after a few minutes, I took a deep breath and picked up my pencil. If this was about dreams, then I wanted to be honest. Slowly, I began sketching. I drew a young woman standing in a bright art studio. Around her were paintings of landscapes, people, and colorful scenes. The windows were wide open, letting sunlight pour into the room. The young woman held a paintbrush in her hand, and she looked peaceful and confident. That woman was the person I hoped to become someday. While I was drawing, I forgot about everything else. The classroom noise faded away, and all my attention focused on the lines forming of the paper. By the time I finished, my heart felt strangely proud and nervous at the same time. Soon, our teacher began walking around the room, looking at each student's work. He stopped at different desks, offering small comments and encouragement. Some students had drawn offices, hospitals, or tall buildings representing their future careers. Eventually, he arrived at my desk. He leaned down and looked closely at my drawing. For several seconds, he didn't say anything. That made me even more nervous. Then, to my surprise, he smiled. "Erica," he said gently, "this is wonderful." I blinked in surprise. I wasn't used to hearing praise like that. "You have real talent," he continued. "Have you ever thought about studying art seriously?" My heart suddenly began beating faster. Part of me wanted to answer immediately. I wanted to say yes and explain how much drawing meant to me, but before I could speak, a few students nearby started whispering. One boy chuckled quietly. "An artist," he said. "That's not a real job." Another student shrugged. "Yeah," she added. "Artists don't make money." Their voices weren't loud, but I heard every word. The confidence I had felt just moments earlier slowly faded. I looked down at my drawing again. Suddenly, it didn't seem as impressive as before. Maybe they were right. Maybe dreaming about becoming an artist was unrealistic. Our teacher frowned slightly when he heard the comments, but he didn't argue. Instead, he gave me one more encouraging nod before moving to another desk. For the rest of the class, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Later that evening, I sat at my desk in my bedroom. The sun was setting outside the window, painting the sky with soft orange and pink colors. My sketchbook was open in front of me. Page after page showed drawings I had made over the years, portraits, landscapes, animals, and scenes from my imagination. Looking at them felt like reading pieces of my own story. Just then, my mother knocked gently on my door before stepping inside. "Erica, dinner is ready," she said. When she noticed my sketchbook, she walked closer and began flipping through the pages. "You've been drawing again," she said with a warm smile. I nodded quietly. She studied several drawings carefully before looking back at me. "These are beautiful," she said sincerely. I hesitated before asking the question that had been in my mind all day. "Mom, do you really think someone like me could become an artist?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sat beside me and looked at the drawings again. Then she said something that I will never forget. "Erica, the most important thing isn't whether other people believe in your dream." She gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "The most important thing is whether you believe in it." That night, after everyone else had gone to sleep, I sat quietly by my window. The town outside had become peaceful and small stars filled the dark sky. I kept thinking about my mother's words. Maybe believing in myself would be the hardest challenge I would ever face. But as I picked up my pencil and turned to a fresh page in my sketchbook, I felt something small but powerful inside my heart. For the first time, I decided that maybe, just maybe, my dream deserved a chance. And that was the moment my journey truly began. After that night, something inside me felt different. I started waking up 15 minutes earlier just to draw. Before school, I would sit at my desk and sketch the sunrise outside my window. The light, the shadows, the quiet streets. It felt like a secret between me and the town. At school, I still didn't talk much about art, but in my notebook, I started writing small notes next to my drawings. Things like "don't give up" and "keep going." I was talking to myself. Sometimes during lunch break, I would sit under the big tree near the school library and draw. Other students played and laughed, but I was happy in my own world. One day, a younger girl from 8th grade sat next to me. She watched me draw for a while. Then she whispered, "Can you teach me how to draw flowers?" I smiled and showed her. That small moment made me feel something new. Maybe art wasn't just for me. Maybe it could help others too. After that evening, I tried to hold on to the small courage my mother had given me. I kept drawing every day, even when homework was heavy and school felt exhausting. My sketchbook slowly filled with new ideas. Faces of people I imagined, quiet streets from my town, and scenes from dreams that lived only in my mind. But believing in myself wasn't easy. Some days I felt confident, especially when I was alone with my art. But other days, the voices of doubt returned. I remembered the students in my class laughing about artists and saying that art wasn't a real career. Their words stayed in my thoughts longer than I wanted. Still, I continued drawing. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened at school. One morning, our principal made an announcement over the loudspeaker. His voice echoed through the classrooms. "Attention, students," he said. "This year, our school will participate in the National Young Artists Competition. Any student who wishes to enter may submit one original artwork." The classroom immediately filled with excited whispers. Some students looked interested. Others didn't seem to care at all. For most of them, it was just another optional activity, but for me, it felt different. My heart started beating faster. A national competition meant that students from many schools would participate. Professional artists and teachers would judge the artwork. It was a big opportunity. And for the first time, I wondered if I should try. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything else. The idea kept returning to my mind. What if I entered the competition? The thought was both exciting and terrifying. After school, I walked home slowly, thinking about it. The sky was gray that afternoon, and a cool wind moved through the quiet streets. My backpack felt heavier than usual, as if it carried all my worries inside. When I reached home, I went straight to my room and opened my sketchbook. Page after page showed drawings I had worked hard on, but suddenly, instead of feeling proud, I started noticing all the mistakes. A line that wasn't perfect, a shadow that looked wrong, a face that didn't feel realistic enough. My confidence began to fade. How could I compete with talented students from all over the country? Maybe my drawings were only good for a small town like mine. Maybe they weren't good enough for the real world. That evening I didn't draw at all. I just sat quietly at my desk, staring at my sketchbook without touching it. My mother noticed something was wrong. She knocked softly on my door and came inside. "You seem quiet today," she said gently. I sighed and told her about the art competition at school. "Everyone can enter," I explained, "but I don't think I should." She looked at me with curiosity. "Why not?" I hesitated before answering. "What if my work isn't good enough?" I said quietly. "What if everyone sees it and realizes I'm not really talented?" My mother didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked to the window and looked outside for a moment. Then she turned back to me. "Erica," she said calmly, "do you remember when you first learned to ride a bicycle?" I nodded. "You fell many times," she continued. "But did that stop you from trying again?" "No," I admitted. "Why not?" "Because I wanted to learn," she smiled slightly. "Exactly. Every dream works the same way. You fall, you doubt yourself, and sometimes you even feel afraid. But the only way to grow is to keep moving forward." Her words were simple, but they touched something deep inside me. She walked over to my desk and gently closed my sketchbook. "You don't have to win the competition," she said. "You only have to be brave enough to try." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the competition. I imagined hundreds of drawings on a big wall. Mine would look so small there. But then I remembered the girl who asked me to teach flowers. I remembered my mother's hand on my shoulder. So I made a decision. I would not draw to win. I would draw to tell my story. The next morning I went to the old library in town. It was quiet and full of books. I sat near the window and started sketching ideas. People walking, the baker, the children on bicycles. I wanted my artwork to feel like home. The librarian saw me and smiled. "Working on something special?" she asked. I nodded. "For a competition." She looked at my sketch and said, "This has heart, Erica." Those 3 words stayed with me all week. That night I thought about her words for a long time. Trying, maybe that was the real challenge. The next day at school, our art teacher reminded the class about the competition. "Remember," he said, "you have 2 weeks to submit your artwork. I encourage anyone who enjoys art to participate." My heart started racing again. 2 weeks. That wasn't much time. I looked down at my desk, unsure of what to do. But then I remembered my mother's words, "You only have to be brave enough to try." Slowly, I raised my hand. My teacher noticed and smiled. "Yes, Erica, I would like to enter the competition," I said softly. A few students turned to look at me. I felt my face grow warm, but this time I didn't look away. "Wonderful," my teacher said. "I'm glad to hear that." For the first time in a long while, I felt something stronger than fear. Hope. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked harder than I ever had before. Every afternoon after school, I sat at my desk and focused completely on my drawing. I wanted to create something meaningful, something that showed how I truly saw the world. The artwork I chose to make was a portrait of a young girl standing in front of a mirror. In the mirror, the girl looked strong and confident, but outside the mirror, she looked uncertain and shy. The drawing represented something very personal to me. It showed the difference between how we sometimes see ourselves and how strong we can actually become. As the days passed, the drawing slowly came to life. Each line, shadow, and detail felt like a step forward in my journey. When I finally finished the artwork, I stared at it quietly for several minutes. For the first time, I didn't focus on the mistakes. Instead, I saw the effort, the emotion, and the courage behind it. And something inside me whispered softly, "Maybe I really can do this." The next day, I carefully placed the drawing inside a protective folder and carried it to school. My hands trembled slightly as I gave it to my art teacher. He looked at the drawing for a long moment before nodding with quiet approval. "Thank you for sharing this, Erica," he said. "I'm proud of you." As I walked out of the classroom, I felt a strange mixture of nervousness and excitement. I had no idea what would happen next, but one thing was certain. For the first time in my life, I had taken a real step toward believing in myself. And no matter what the results would be, that step already meant more than I could explain. After I submitted my artwork for the competition, the days that followed felt strangely long. At first, I tried not to think about it too much. I told myself that simply participating was already a big step for me, but that didn't stop my mind from wondering. Every morning when I walked into school, I felt a small wave of nervousness. What if the judges didn't like my drawing? What if my artwork looked childish compared to the others? Sometimes I even wished I could take my drawing back and hide it in my sketchbook again. But it was too late for that. The competition results would be announced in 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks taught me something important. I stopped waiting for results and started enjoying the process. I joined the school art club. Only 4 students came at first. We met every Friday. We shared pencils, ideas, and stories. I helped them with shading. They helped me with colors. One day our teacher put our small group work on the school bulletin board. Students stopped to look. Some even said nice things. I realized art was not about being the best. It was about connecting. At home, I started drawing my family too. My mother cooking, my father reading the newspaper. I gave them the sketches. My mother kept hers on the fridge. She said it made her smile every morning. Slowly, my town didn't feel too small anymore. It felt like my first gallery. To keep myself distracted, I continued drawing every evening. My sketchbook slowly filled with new sketches. I didn't focus on perfection anymore. Instead, I focused on expressing what I felt and what I imagined. For the first time, drawing didn't feel like something I had to prove to others. It felt like something I did because I loved it. Still, the day of the announcement eventually arrived. That morning, the entire school gathered in the auditorium. Students filled the rows of chairs talking excitedly with their friends. Teachers stood near the stage, preparing for the announcement. My heart beat faster than usual. I sat quietly in the middle row trying to calm myself. "Relax," I whispered to myself. "Whatever happens, you were brave enough to try." The principal walked onto the stage, and the room slowly became quiet. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "Today we will announce the results of this year's National Young Artists Competition." The tension in the room instantly grew. He started by thanking all the students who had participated. Then he explained that the judges had received hundreds of artworks from different schools across the country. Hearing that number made my stomach twist with nervousness. Hundreds of students, hundreds of talented artists, and my drawing was somewhere among them. The principal began announcing the honorable mentions first. Several students from different schools were recognized for their creativity and effort. The audience clapped politely after each name. My hands rested tightly together in my lap. Then the principal moved on to the top 3 winners. "Third place," he said, reading from the paper in his hand. A student from another school. The audience applauded. Second place. Another student from a different city. More applause. My heart sank slightly. For a moment, I thought the results were finished. Then the principal looked up again, and now the first place winner of this year's National Young Artists Competition. The entire room became silent. I held my breath. The winner is Erica Patel from Riverside High School. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. The room erupted into applause, but I sat frozen in my chair. Did he really say my name? My art teacher gently touched my shoulder. Erica, he said with a proud smile. That's you. Suddenly, everything felt unreal. My legs trembled slightly as I stood up and slowly walked toward the stage. The applause grew louder as I moved through the rows of students. I could hardly believe what was happening. Just a few weeks ago, I had been too afraid to even admit that I wanted to become an artist. And now I was standing on stage holding a certificate and a small golden medal. The principal shook my hand and smiled warmly. Congratulations, he said. Your artwork deeply impressed the judges. The bright lights of the auditorium made it hard to see the audience clearly, but I knew my classmates and teachers were watching. Some of the same students who had once laughed about artists were now clapping along with everyone else. But strangely, their opinions didn't matter as much as I once thought they did. What mattered most was something else. As I stood there holding the award, I realized something important. The biggest victory wasn't winning the competition. The biggest victory was the moment I decided to believe in myself. Later that evening, I returned home with the certificate in my hands. My mother was waiting in the living room. When she saw the medal around my neck, her eyes widened with surprise and joy. Erica, you did it, she exclaimed. I smiled and hugged her tightly. Thank you, I said softly. For what? She asked. For helping me believe in myself. She laughed gently. No, she said. You believed in yourself. I only reminded you that you could. That night, I sat by my bedroom window once again, the same place where I had once doubted my dream. The town outside was quiet, just like always, but something inside me had changed. I understood now that believing in yourself doesn't mean you will never feel afraid. It means you keep moving forward even when fear tries to stop you. My dream of becoming an artist was still a long journey. But now I knew one thing for sure. I was strong enough to follow it. And for the first time, I truly believed in the girl I was becoming. Moral of the story. Sometimes the hardest person to convince is yourself. But when you learn to believe in your own abilities, you open the door to possibilities you never imagined. Confidence doesn't appear overnight. It grows slowly each time you choose courage instead of doubt. And every dream begins with one simple decision, believing that you are capable. If this story inspired you, remember that believing in yourself is the first step toward achieving your dreams. Tell me in the comments what is one dream you believe in, even if others doubt it. And if you enjoy learning English through inspiring stories like this, don't forget to like the video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to our channel for more meaningful English stories. Your next favorite story is waiting for you.